See you in a bit. Yep, see you in a bit.
Coffee's on the way.
It is. Okay, cool. Sorry, guys. I just I got involved. Do we need to, should we close this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Might as well.
All right.
So, did you guys introduce yourself?
You know, hi, I'm Joel.
I'm Rieko.
Say it again?
Rieko.
Rieko.
Yep.
Nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you too.
I'm Bob.
Bob. All right. We know each other.
So Joel, they came with questions,
Yeah.
and I guess they'll shoot and whatever else you want to talk about. And
Okay.
Me?
go, man,
Oh, yeah.
official.
So-
Sure, coffees.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
On, as a master's student here in a graduate program,
Mm-hmm.
I chose a thesis topic of comparing acquisition of jazz language with actual language.
Uh-huh.
And I just want to know what your thoughts of that.
Yeah, there's definitely a connection. You know, in the same way that we learn how to talk and we learn syntax and you know, how to put grammar together, how to put, you know, first we learn we learn individual words, which might be like learning lines or licks, you know, and then, but I always say that, you know, that the big thing about language, whether it be, you know, traditional jazz language or you know, speaking English in well, which I'm not doing very well today, is it's architecture. You know, it's how you put those things together. So, you know, I would say that really, yes,
Sorry.
that's okay.
I'm sorry.
You know, I would say that, how can I say this? I mean, it's like kind of like what I was talking about this morning, as far as like the lines and the, you know, the licks that you learn. I hate the word licks, but I mean it's kind of traditional. But the vocabulary that you're learning is just a means to an end. All of those little lines that we learn or solos that we transcribe and memorize. It's just giving us building blocks or the media that we're going to use to tell our story later on, you know, or at least to give us some sort of fluency. And so as far, yeah, I mean, it is much like language in that way. I mean, the more, you know, but it has two aspects. I mean, there's the accumulation of vocabulary, which is one aspect, and then the more important aspect to me is how do you put that together? Because there are a lot of really eloquent, you know, improvisers that don't have that much vocabulary. But it's the way that they use that vocabulary, that they use what they have in tandem with one another, that makes the difference, you know. And I think you could say that about some great writers too. I mean, you know, there are great writers that are very florid, like Herman Melville, for instance. And then there are writers that are much more straight to the point, like Ernest Hemingway, for instance. You know, I mean, not that Ernest Hemingway doesn't have a great vocabulary, but it's a different style of writing, right? It's as if, like, you know, you could say, you know, the same kind of difference between someone very florid on the saxophone, like Michael Brecker was, as opposed to someone very stark, say, like, more like, I'm trying to think of a good example, like Charlie Rouse, for instance. You know what I mean? Very, very disparate styles. But, and you know, Charlie Rouse was an example of a guy who had a lot of the same lines. You'd hear lines repeating a lot of the time, but it was the way he put them together that made it interesting. And I think you know, writers, creative writers, and improvisers have a lot of similarities in that way. I mean, the only difference to me is one is sort of like in time, in the moment, as the tempo is going by. Tempo is like the real difference, you know, because I mean, you're sort of writing out of time in a way, you know. I mean, you have a deadline, obviously, so that's giving you some sort of structure, but I think it's really just the architecture that's interesting about writing and music, and that to me is sort of the big connecting thread between the two. So I hope that answers.
Yeah, one
Yeah, sure.
extra part.
Sure.
So if you would take scales and then patterns, chords, those type of things, how would you relate those in a grammatical sense, or to English or any other language itself? Scales are usually termed as being alphabet.
Right.
Of it, the patterns of the words.
Right.
And then the chords are the syntax.
Right.
Not syntax, but the how do I want to say the
subject.
Not necessarily that, the context of how the words are placed in the context.
Okay. Yeah.
Like that. And scales in general. I know chromatic scale would be like the alphabet. You know what I mean? Because that's every single note.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure those definitions will really stick, because music is first of all, music is more. What's the word I'm looking for? Is more oblique than that.
Yes.
I mean, it's not so specific. I mean, it's specific, but it's not as codified to me in a certain sense. I mean, if you hear a chord being played, for instance, it has a visceral emotional response. That, boy, this is a hard subject to talk about. I mean, because I don't know that you could exactly equate, say, the chords are the context or the melody, or the 12 tones are the words. I mean, you could make an analogy like that, but I kind of look at it with a broader perspective. I think it's less useful to really necessarily make those delineations than to look at the actual drama of music, the episodic nature of music as it would relate to a well-written paragraph, for instance, or a well-written story. So in other words, when you're writing, see, to me the most important part about writing or playing is not necessarily in the little technique that's there in the micro, although that is important, but it's more like, what do you have to say, and basically your technique is just there to serve to make that picture clear, So to me, that's the big thing. I mean, it would be difficult. I don't know if you can make specific.
Well, actually, what I was going to suggest is that you're talking about language in terms of improvisation.
Yes.
So I guess writing wouldn't be like improvisation, and it would be more like composition of music, in that we have smaller time restraints.
Right.
So it's more like speaking.
Yes.
In terms of you give a question and we answer. Now there's more of a. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know
Well,
what I mean?
actually, that's great. That's actually the next level. That you just.
But I only got that from you saying that, because writing is Bill. It's just going back to this Bill Evans thing we said, where you might compose 30 seconds of music and it might take you 3 months. Right. Whereas playing or improvising, 30 seconds music in 30 seconds time.
Right.
Yes.
So I think you should be careful about how you address that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
In terms of.
Yes.
In terms of.
That's actually that would be a good part of the paper, though, to talk about the difference between writing and speaking in the moment.
Yes.
Right? Because you're writing in the moment as well, but you're doing it alone.
Yeah. And actually, in a weird way, there's a lot of great. We were talking about hip hop today. There are some great hip hop artists who can really improvise with language.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the Roots, Tariq from the Roots, Black Thought. He really does it in real time.
Right.
30 seconds of lyrics in 30 seconds time. He hasn't honed it.
Right.
So that would be very interesting. Maybe you could expand the paper into not just, or if you want to just stay with improvisation, but also composition.
True.
Yeah.
True.
I think hip hop is definitely very jazz, even the evolution of it, because so in the early '90s and stuff, everyone was like, "This is a fade." It was dissed by the people, and now it's getting more accepted. And 30 years from now, we're going to be learning about it in poetry classes.
Yeah.
Well, Sean, even before that, in the '80s, when we were in high school, and things like that. Grandmaster Flash, and all those guys, Run DMC, and early Fresh Prince, and Jazzy Jeff, and there's some great stuff.
Yeah,
actually.
Sure.
It was interesting, but
yeah, I think, but to get back to the issue, I think that the verbal aspect or the connection between the two really does come down to how, what's the thrust of what you're trying to say, and how are you going to use either the techniques of music or the vocabulary, the actual verbal vocabulary that you have to elucidate your point in either art form, in either discipline, I should say, So that to me is the answer. It's just that they both have their building blocks, and then it's up to you to use those things in service of the story. It's always in service of the story, So that's. Mm-hmm. I think
that opened up a new way of thinking about it. So
okay, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Did you have any others, Bob?
I want other people to have time too.
Okay.
Oh.
Rieko?
Okay. I need to still think about it, but.
Okay.
All right. I was talking to Sean today about this topic. But I just have some certain musicians that influence.
Yeah.
And then a week or 2 weeks, I listen to their music, and then get the idea from the CDs or from performances. But just I pretend sound. Their sound,
Yeah.
I kind of
you imitate.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I want to get the idea to my own
Right.
way.
Yeah, I understand.
So how do you get out from
from the influence? Get out from under the influence,
yeah,
as it were.
Or,
yeah, that's a really good question, and I think that's a long process. It takes a long time. I mean, I think the real answer to that is there's no short way to that end, and also we're always further trying to find ourselves. There's never a moment there's not going to be a moment in our lives where okay, now I know who I am. You're going to get closer and closer to knowing who you are and what's going on in your head and your heart. But I think that that's not just a music issue; it's a life issue. It's knowing what's healthy for you, what relationships that you want around you, how do you want your life to look, and all of those things really go into, because really, I mean, music itself is really a byproduct of life. It's not life itself, it's something that comes out of our life, right? Yeah. It's a result of life. Yeah. So I think that everything that you do, all the behaviors, all of those things come to bear when you perform. And I think when you start to realize that, when you start to play music from that perspective, from the perspective of I have something inside that needs to come out, as opposed to this is my version of Coltrane, or this is my version of Charlie Parker or whatever. When those influences start to, obviously they're there, but they start to be in service of a greater thought or a greater idea that you're trying to portray. So, but it takes years. It takes a long time, and it's okay. It's okay to imitate. That's always the big dirty word. Everyone's like, I have so many students that. I say, well, you really should transcribe some solos and memorize some solos and learn the tradition. Yeah. They say, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to end up being a clone of Joe Henderson or Charlie Parker. And I say, no, you're not. Because first of all, you'll never sound like them anyway. Yeah. You're playing these notes. They're not playing these notes, and you're learning the ins and outs, the nuts and bolts of this music. The basic fundamental architecture of what's going on. That word keeps coming up, architecture. Knowing the fundamentals, the cornerstones of how to play jazz. So, I think it's really a rite of passage. We listen to music, we get turned on by jazz because we like the sound of it. It's exciting because it has the blues, it has great rhythm, it has really interesting harmony a lot of the time. It has people with individual sonic sound, like their actual the timbre of their sounds is different. They have different voices on their instruments, or if they're a vocalist, they have different voices. You know, I mean, there's so much that goes into it that I think the wonderful thing about it is it is an arena of endless discovery. There's endless possibility there for all of us to continually explore. So I guess, you know, this is a very long answer to your question, but I think the way it's you know, you obviously want to find out who you are and get out from the influences. Mm-hmm. But I think you can't worry about it too much because I think the only way to get there is to play and play and play and play. You know, that's the only way. I mean, you know, and playing outside of the practice room as well. I mean, obviously we all have to practice, but really where that comes into bear, where you're really going to find yourself, is in the practice of playing jazz. You know, I mean, playing with other people and listening to them and finding your way within a real situation in real time. There's nothing like that. You know, that's the only way to really find your own voice, you know. And people do it to different extents. I mean, not everyone's going to be Coltrane, not everyone's going to be Sonny Rollins, but that doesn't invalidate what you're going to be. You know, you're going to be the best you that you possibly can, you know. So it's your journey. There's no one else's journey but your own, you know. So yeah.
Sean, did you have something you want to ask?
I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about the jazz education system, and I'm doing a paper about how I'm finding things or people recurring things that people say that there's not a lot of individuality because of the school systems. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you thought there was any truth to that.
I don't think it's the school system's fault if people aren't being individual. I think it's a lack of imagination on the part of the student. You know, I mean, I think that it's not the school's job to make you a creative artist. It's not the school's job. The school's job is to show you the basic tools of music, the basic elements of music, and get you well versed in harmony, in rhythm, you know, sight reading, being able to play in tune with a good sound. You know, I look at school as more of a place to get those things together. You know, and you know, even the old guys, they first of all, they never had jazz school back in the day because they were playing gigs. They learned it on the gig. You know, in fact, most of the schools looked down upon it. They didn't want you playing jazz. If they knew you were playing jazz, you know, they'd kick you out of the studio. You know, really.
Mm-hmm. No, for real.
Yeah, I mean, that happened. Miles Davis was at Juilliard, and they found out he was playing jazz, and they didn't like it, and he was like, "Oh, screw you, I'm going to go play." You know, so I think the thing is that. Yes, there is a certain amount of cookie cutter attitude as far as in the university sense of not the university, but as far as the jazz educational aids that are out there. Everyone kind of uses the same books and is into a lot of the same methodology to get to what they're getting at, and people also listen to a lot of the same players. I mean, it's almost like, you know, the big focus is always on Coltrane and always on Bird, and now, you know, more always on Mark Turner and always on Brad Mehldau for our generation, you know, and they're all great. Don't get me wrong, but I think there is a little bit of a myopic attitude of like having the blinders on to a lot of the just not even regardless of even music outside of jazz. If we're just talking about jazz itself, whatever that means to us, you know, people are kind of missing this whole other, this whole other section of artists that are there to be drawn upon or to learn from. So I think when you hear a lot of students coming out of school these days, this is a little bit of a generalization, but you're hearing a lot of people studying the same players all the time, you know. And that to me is what's going on. Like for a while, alto players all sounded like Kenny Garrett for a little while, you know. But I mean, that's again a generalization. But a lot of alto players for a while sounded just like Kenny Garrett, you know. Now you go to Europe and you hear tons of tenor players imitating Mark Turner down to the little pigeon-toed stance and like all this. I mean, really, literally down to a T. You know, I hear young pianists copying Mehldau all the time and making their trio sound like that. And that's great. I mean, they're inspired by it, which is great. But I just think that there is sort of, maybe it's the lack of gigs. You know, maybe it's the fact that there aren't as many gigs and that people are only getting their jazz from the internet now, or listening to iTunes. They get, they download, and everyone wants, I mean, like Brad's a big star, Mark, Josh Redmond are big stars. So it's like they want to be like the big star, so they're checking that out, but they're kind of missing all of this other stuff that's going on, So that might be part of it. And also, there is sort of a codified attitude about how, harmony, all that stuff is presented a lot of the time. I mean, and it's tough because, I'm sorry, this is a big issue for me. I mean, I hope you don't mind me rambling about this, but, there's sort of there's a philosophical argument, and I've talked to educators about this, is what is your responsibility as an educator to your student? Because there are kind of two separate tracks. One thing is you could say that your responsibility is to prepare your student for the reality, the economic reality of the music world, and prepare them to be flexible to play as many different styles of music as possible, so that they can go out and have a viable career as an instrumentalist, and give them the greatest possible chance of working in a lot of different environments. Now that's one attitude, and a lot of educators would take that attitude because they're thinking pragmatically. Now that's not that. The other side of that is you have some educators saying, no, that's not what this is about. What having a jazz school is all about is trying to let people find themselves as musical individuals, and really help them find their artistry, find who they are as an individual artist, which may mean putting all that other stuff to the wayside. So I mean, it's a tough question, but I guess there, like for instance, when the IAJU was still happening, the International Association of Jazz Educators, that was the ultimate sort of example of the cattle call mentality of jazz education. Just going here, it's like going to a bit it's like The Office, going to some.
Have you guys ever attended any of those?
They might be too young. They might, yeah.
No, they were really. I mean, you would be in a different city every year, and it'd be the hugest, biggest hotel in that city, and literally there would be 100 clinics a day.
Yeah. Of
different things, of jazz education, and Bob Mintzer said a funny thing one time. He said, I was afraid I was going to go into my hotel room, open up the closet, and there'd be a big band in there. It's actually kind of funny. Because every room, it's like every nook and cranny had a big band playing.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. No, I know, it's hilarious. It was really, it was like the supermarket, meat market of jazz. But I mean, there's good and bad in that. I mean, at least it was an event for jazz, in its way. It's hard to say. I mean, again, it comes down to the individual. It's really an individual responsibility to find your own voice. No one can give it to you. It's like Jeff Keyser had a great quote. He said, "To all my students, you can't download a career." That's what he was saying. You can't download a career. And what he means by that is you can't just accumulate everyone's licks and knowledge and expect that you're going to be handed, a record contract and become a star, because it's about more than that. It's about your path and your journey. And the older I get, the more I realize how important that is. That you have to, that life is short, and if you're either going to make an artistic statement or you're not. It's really a choice. Because there are a lot of great musicians or great craftsmen who are in Broadway pits. That are, and that's totally cool. I mean, maybe they have families, maybe they're doing their thing, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it's a certain choice. I mean, they've decided to go down that road. So, it's kind of like it's a philosophical divide there. Really, there are some schools that really encourage the individuality. There are some schools that really encourage hewing to a certain ideal of acumen, of instrumental acumen, so that they're preparing people for the workplace.
We have a school-wide philosophy, and it's funny. Mark talks about it every each semester. Beginning of each semester, we have a faculty meeting. But it comes down to depending who you're studying with.
Yeah,
it's really a teacher's philosophy, and
that's true.
I know a lot of even in the saxophone. If I look at it, I could almost tell you once I get to know a student who they're going to want to study with.
Yeah.
Because I got to see where they want to do and who they think would be good for them.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're right on the button, in my opinion. And then sometimes it's just like, well, you really don't do this well, and then it's as the department head to be philosophically like, what do I want to do? What's my job? Exactly what you said.
Yeah.
I think my job is to hear what they're saying, but just is awareness.
Yeah.
Awareness of what they can expect if they do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And if you're going to be a saxophone player, you're going to ignore your doubles, or you're going to ignore things that expect that you're going to have to do something more like this. But if you're going to be a show player, expect to play the same thing for 8 weeks at a time, and that maybe your creative sense or your creative time might be diminished, or you know what I mean. So, I think, and then you can just grade hard work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can grade whether they're working at something.
Right.
And as long as it's consistent on some level. But I think you just got to make them aware really, students are paying your money, and hopefully they should be handing over their faith in you, that you know what you're talking about. Hopefully they do their research on you as a teacher and say, oh, I'm going to listen to what this guy has to say, and I'm paying a lot of money to get what he has to say. Some students, Sean, will pay a lot of money and then battle you for 4 or 5 years. Yeah. They do.
Yeah, I totally see that.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, my point of view is if I can just put a dot at the end of the sentence, I think that realistically, even if your thrust is I want to write my own music, I want to play my own music, I want to follow my dream, I want to I have this idea of how I hear jazz, how I compose, how I improvise, I have a vision for what I want to do. That's great, but really the school is there just to give you the tools to find that. It's not the school's responsibility to find out what your vision is, to give you some sort of like creative spark. That's up to the student. That's up to each artist, I should say. And so I think the school really the role of the school is really, to me, just giving people the building blocks. That's what school's about. And giving them some experiential stuff too. Having them play with other people, learn from their peers, learn from obviously there's some experiential things, but really most of the experience is going to come after school is over. So I think really the role of school, it's like I remember reading about Warren Marsh giving a saxophone lesson to someone, and the guy wanted to come in and play bird licks for him for an hour, and Warren said, play me a G harmonic minor scale. The guy couldn't do it.
Wow.
And he said, all right, 1, 2, 3, and had the guy play G harmonic minor for the next 20 minutes until he had it. So that shows you something. That's Warren Marsh, one of the greatest tenor saxophonists in history, knowing that what this guy needed to have was fundamentals. Because if you want to be some creative genius, but you have no idea how to go about it, you're just floundering with no direction, it's not going to happen. You're just going to sound shitty. So.
Yeah. On that same note, here's something you might want to consider. This is what your paper's on?
Partially, yeah.
Partially, because I've had a debate with students. Their culminating thing, recital, is recital material. And I've had this set. They say, well, artistically, I want to do this. I tell them, well, go get a gig somewhere and do that. But that's not what this is. This isn't. It's really kind of a way for us to grade an exam, for you to see, do you have these tools under your belt? It can be very artistic and very creative, but like one guy said, this is a true story. He said, I really want to go in to play. I never even heard of such thing, even Afro klezmer music. I'm like, well, go get a gig to do that, but that's just not going to fly here because it's not measurable. It's not this. You know what I mean? It's not that kind of thing. You know what I mean? So you can take it all the way to that point, Sean.
Thank you very much.
There's another element I wanted to ask you about.
Go.
It's part of the same thing. I've read some stuff, and I read that Stanley Crouch, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Stanley Crouch.
His view, if you're going to call this music jazz, if you're going to call it jazz, his view is it has to swing, it has to have the blues, and he thinks when you start adding the fusion, when you start to have rock feel, it's not jazz anymore. And I tend to agree with him. It's like, that's still great music, but if you're going to calling this music jazz, you know, it's Wayne Shorter, it's Coltrane, it's that kind of thing. It's Charlie Parker, it's Louis Armstrong. So, and then the other issue with that is some people think that you know, there's no room left in that style to develop, or like to be an individual, which is I disagree with, because everybody when they improvise, everybody sounds. I think it's like endless.
Right.
And a lot of people say that because it's not evolving into different styles, that goes against the tradition of jazz.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's like jazz is kind of a classic music, and there's still room within it to play it and to still be creative in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering how you felt about that.
Well,
I know it's a big.
No, well, I mean, first of all, you know, I think it's mostly semantics. You know, I mean, I think you know, Stanley Crouch is a journalist. You know, and knowing Stanley Crouch as I do know Stanley Crouch, you know, I think his first talent is as a journalist, and I, you know, I'm not sure that those kind of philosophical arguments about what jazz is and what jazz isn't really get anyone anywhere. You know, because I think the reason that we all started playing jazz, I mean, obviously, you know, swing is a huge element in playing jazz, no question about it. Blues is a huge element of playing jazz. But would I say that jazz is not or music is not jazz if it doesn't have one of those elements? No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, that's just that's my point of view. I mean, and people may not agree with me, but I think more importantly is ultimately, what do you have to say yourself? You know, and you know, I mean, obviously there's a tradition. I mean, I come out of the jazz tradition too. I mean, what does that mean though? I mean, yes, I come out of Coleman Hawkins, I come out of Sonny Rollins, I come out of Charlie Parker, I come out of all of those people. However, you know, when I was growing up, I was listening to the Beatles and you know, Bill Withers and stuff like that. Like, my parents were not into listening to jazz, and I'm a product, and Stevie Wonder and that kind of stuff. So I'm a product of a different generation, really, you know. And I think the problem becomes, you know, are you being true to yourself? Are you really reflecting what's truly inside you? Because I think sometimes people can, you know, sometimes I'll go to see jazz concerts and it feels really dead to me because people aren't in the moment. They're regurgitating something, they're rehashing something, and they haven't. It's like lazy thinking, you know. It's to me, it's lazy just to go and learn a solo and learn a certain amount of vocabulary and then just stop there, you know, and just play those things because they existed already and they work, you know. I hear tons of musicians in New York like that have been playing the same bebop solo for 20 years, you know.
But if someone has a passion for traditional jazz and they're not just regurgitating.
Right, but what is traditional jazz though? What does that mean? You know,
well, yeah.
What does it mean? I mean, you kind of told me what it means to you. I mean, you know, that it's a very slippery definition. That's the thing. It's like, I mean, and it's totally valid to have that opinion. I mean, I don't think anyone can really. I mean, I'm not sure that there's really a right answer to that. You know, because what jazz is to Wynton Marsalis is not going to be what jazz is to Keith Jarrett. But they're both jazz musicians. You know, I mean, I'm sorry, they both are. You know. I mean, to me, it's like jazz. The strength of jazz is that it can eat. It can take into itself other forms of music. I mean, I think that's the strength of it, is that it is so diverse, is that it does allow itself to be permeated. It doesn't put up boundaries. You know, I mean, you know, what would the world have been like if Wayne Shorter and Joe Zawinul, who grew up playing in jazz bands, Zawinul was in Cannonball's band, Wayne Shorter was in Miles' band and Art Blakey's band. They're both in some of the greatest jazz bands of all time. But what if they hadn't founded Weather Report? You know, now a lot of people would argue that that's not jazz, but it's certainly infused with the jazz mentality. You know, I mean, it has jazz harmony in it. It has, or jazz harmony, whatever. You know, it has, you know, 20th century harmony in it, like a lot of jazz does, and it has some of the vocabulary of jazz in the sense that the melodies are related to, you know, things that happened before it in the jazz tradition. So, you know, I really think that all of those arguments about what jazz is or what jazz isn't, to me, it's a little bit of a waste of time. You know, I mean, not, I mean, is that what you're?
No, I
what
agree with you. I think it's.
I mean, I just think it's not. I think it just literally it's a waste of energy, because really that energy would be better spent writing a tune, you know, or learning someone solo, learning about the history. I mean, I'm not trying to discount history, but I think there's a healthy irreverence as well. I think you have to have reverence for what happened, and we all love those players. Believe me. I mean, I have the ultimate respect for all of those people. Lester Young is one of my gods, you know, but at the same time, Lester Young would have wanted me to be Joel, you know, and so that's the ultimate thing, is that all of this stuff is capitulated by us becoming, you know, our own individuals. So, and to me, like, no matter what you call it, whether you call it jazz, whether you call it improvised music, I never liked the idea of saying jazz has to be this way, because I don't like it. I don't like being told what I have to do, you know. I think if you told Mingus that, you know, jazz has to be this and this and this, screw you, man. He wouldn't have taken that. You know, I mean, those guys were. I'm just playing music. Duke Ellington hated the term jazz. He'd say over and over, "I'm not a jazz musician. I'm a musician. I'm just a musician." You know, and so I think it can be really limiting in that way, like to try and codify jazz as into a box. It's not going to fit in a box.
If someone plays in that old kind of style,
yeah,
or like the '60s style, or
Mm-hmm.
with you know, traditional kind of swing or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still think there's room for individuality in that, since
Oh,
there's
sure.
been so much done?
No, sure. I mean, obviously, no, you know, nothing is created in a vacuum. I mean, we all, you know, we all have gone through periods of time. I mean, I've gone through periods of imitation of lots of players and been really informed and enriched by that. No question about it. But I do think that it's a matter of, you know, obviously we're influenced, but it's also a matter of looking. You have to eventually look inside yourself and realize that all of those influences are just tools. You know, again. So you know, yeah, I do think that there's room to be creative, and I don't think you have to reinvent the wheel. But I do think that you have to take a hard look inside yourself to find out what ideas you have, you know, that you're going to bring to bear. That are influenced by all of those old things, but aren't enslaved to those old ideas. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of music where I hear it and it just sounds like a watered down version of something else. You know, and we all go through that. I've been guilty of that as well. I'm not going to say that I'm exempt from that, but that's a rite of passage. I mean, that's part of how we grow. I mean, we imitate, and then it's like Clark Terry says: we imitate, we assimilate, and then we innovate. You know, if we get that far. You know. Yes, I mean, I think, you know, the optimistic answer is yes. There's always room for originality and creativity. But I mean, again, that's semantics. I mean, room. I mean, what does that mean? Room for growth. I mean, basically, the issue is just to find out who you are. And if you find out who you are and you're true to yourself, that's the end of the battle right there. You can't worry about whether it's innovative or not. You just have to find out who you are. You know, because the critics will figure that out. You know what I mean? They'll write about it and they'll say what they have to say, and maybe they're wrong too. So I mean, who knows? But I just think it's not so much about. It's just about finding your voice. You know, finding your voice within whatever context you're working in. You know. So I don't know. Sorry, I tend to ramble.
Joel, this is Don Glandon.
I think we've met one time.
Yeah, nice to see you.
He's the head of the grad department and chair of the piano department. Overall, good guy.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all.
I have to go do freshman improv. When you guys are done, can you still go to your classes? And I may pop in because Jim Savoy asked me for some pictures. You guys, I may come in and take some pictures of you working with the undergrads. Okay. Sorry.
Cool. Nice to see you.
Jay, go ahead. I know you have a few.
Yeah.
My question has to do with the future of jazz music, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Since we're talking about names. As I'm sure you're aware, the number of places where you can play jazz and make a living is steadily declining.
Yeah.
Some people say that the future of jazz lies in the concert hall. And I was wondering if you had an opinion as to whether that's true, or whether you think there will be still a place for jazz in smaller music clubs 20, 25 years from now.
Yeah, well, I think jazz is always going to survive because people will always want to improvise and play live music with each other. I hope. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe people will look back on these recordings and say, "Wow, was he wrong?" But I hope not. I mean, I hope that people will still want to socially interact face to face and not just camera to camera, and actually have real human interactions musically with each other. So I think like again, it's like you can't. It's like as soon as you start to try and control the evolution of something, it's going to slip right out of your hands, right? So what we think is jazz or isn't jazz is going to be immaterial because it's always changing. It's always morphing into something else. So I almost think it's more helpful to think about all of this stuff in the greater realm of music. Jazz was one, great, beautiful, is one great, beautiful, shoot off of the tree or branch of the tree of music in history. So, and who knows where it's going to go. I mean, people have been improvising forever. We all improvise every day. I'm improvising right now, in a sense, talking to you. I'm coming up with stuff, formulating it in my brain and putting it together in the moment. I'm hoping that people will always want to do that, and not just have things fed to them, because that's the danger, I think. I think the danger is that we're the way society is today, the way technology is today, it's very easy to just get fed stuff. We get fed by the internet. It's like bang, right there, bang, instant gratification. And jazz is certainly not about instant gratification. It's about long-term kind of gratification, and also faith in the moment. Of course there is some gratification in playing and being joyful about that, but. So I mean, this is a very philosophical answer to your question. I think that for that reason, yes, jazz will survive. Whatever I think, if you look at the grandiose term of jazz, if you're talking about the economics of it and the actual, feasibility of making a living at jazz and all of those kind of things, I don't know, man. I think it's probably always been tough. I mean, even though there was more work, obviously for jazz musicians because it was closer to being popular music, or it was popular music earlier in the 20th century. If you read the books about those guys, they struggled too. I mean, for lots of different reasons. So I mean, I think it's always a struggle, and I think that there will always be people out there, I hope, that love the history of this music and care enough about it to maybe they have people that are patrons of the arts, to still put on festivals, and whether it's the concert hall, maybe not. I mean, it could be the concert hall plus a dingy little club plus playing in the park plus in the recording studio. I mean, it's all of those things I think that make up the big stew that we're in. And the older I get, the more I realize that it really is like a big bubbling pot, of tons of different things that are going on all the time. When I look at my career, it's very eclectic in that way, So I think jazz is gonna survive, but it's gonna survive wherever it does. It's like a weed, It's not gonna go away because it's just too strong. There's something about it that's always the underdog, and it's always gonna survive like a weed. So.
Me? Yeah. Let me think. What's the meaning of life? No, I get actually your opinion of what you've seen. I mean, you've taught lessons here, you've taught workshops here, you sat in my transcription class.
Yeah.
Your opinion of what's going on here? Good, bad?
Oh,
good, bad, the ugly?
No, I think it's good. I mean, especially today. Well, I mean, I've had a limited exposure so far,
yeah.
But in the few times that I've come down, all my private students have been very interactive with me, which is great. No one's come in and been complacent.
Right.
That's the big thing. To me, the biggest sin at a place like this, when you're paying tuition, and a lot of tuition to go to a place like this, if you're paying money or your parents are paying money, whatever it is, or you're taking out loans, you know, you got to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like, you know, the only sin to me, you know, it's not a sin if you can't play well yet.
Mm-hmm.
It is a sin if you're here and you're just fucking around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So to me, it's like the complacency is the enemy. But I haven't seen that here. Every time I've taught a lesson, every time I've done a master class, especially more and more so now, people seemed like today people were really interactive and really had insightful questions. So obviously there's something good going on here, because every student that I've talked to has been very thoughtful. I mean, obviously there are different levels of musicality at this point, and there are people, some people are very well versed in you know, jazz vocabulary and tradition, and some people aren't, but everyone I've met has been, you know, enthusiastic and is interested in improving themselves, and that's all you can ask for.
Yeah.
You know, because life's going to kick everyone in the ass after they're out of here anyway. So I mean, you know, they're going to have to figure it out one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, you know, from my limited experience here, I've seen really positive results, and I think the teachers are fantastic too. I mean, I think the people that are teaching here, including yourself, really, you know, really have a good, healthy attitude, you know, of being involved, you know, knowing when to use tough love, you know, knowing when to be, you know, use a softer touch. I mean, it's an art, you know. I mean, you know, some teachers, I've had teachers that have crushed me when I was younger, because I was a pretty sensitive kid, and I had some really harmful teachers as well. And then some teachers who weren't, you know, who just weren't interested, who were just there for the paycheck. Yeah. So I mean, it's important to find that balance, to be able to, you know, to be able to know what a student needs, and not coddle them, but you know, also, you know, know where they're at and be truthful with them without being crushing. You know, I mean, I think there's a real art to that. Yeah. You know, so.
No, I agree. It's and sometimes I try not to bring your own personal stuff to the table, which is a whole, you know, as all of us will do with teacher.
That's hard.
And you know, if you had a shitty night, or you didn't, or you didn't sleep, or the student that would before you didn't have their shit together. Like if one student comes in and doesn't have his stuff together, and then the next student comes in and screws up the first time, don't carry one thing over from the other. Don't say, none of you guys have your shit together. That's not the truth. But that happens, you know what I mean?
It does happen.
Everybody deserves a clean slate. And that's not easy to do. We're all human, you know, we carry
people get tired, and you know, I mean, it's, you know, after if you're had 8 hours and everyone's kind of like not playing well that day, it's, you know, you can lose your patience. But it is important, I think, to deal with everyone as an individual, and keep in mind that not to paint everyone with broad strokes, that everyone has different needs.
And the other thing that's tough, and you guys will probably, if you don't realize it already, is that, you know, education as a business is already, there's a contradictory thing going on there, you know, when, you know, true learning does in everybody's own time, and, you know, and we're trying to really train a craft and an art and say, but you have to have it together by the 22nd of, you know, which is really hard, but that's part of running a business and saying, oh, I think you're certified to be able to play jazz now.
Right.
So,
we used to joke, like, you know, if you graduated with an A+ average, you get a gig at the Vanguard. You show it to Lorraine, I get a gig at the Vanguard.
Yeah, right.
But like C- and you get into smalls.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
You know?
Yeah, right.
Oh, no Vanguard for you.
D, you're playing in wedding.
Yeah, D, exactly. D, you're going out to Jersey.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Yeah, really. But you know, it's funny because it's just contradictory. But you try and bring as much real life and real learning in as possible.
Yeah.
But there are just constraints sometimes you need to follow.
I mean, it's a weird, you know, look, it's really a strange kind of unnatural thing to have, in a way, to be teaching jazz in school, because it's that paradox. Because how do you teach jazz? You know, I mean, obviously there are techniques to it, and there's a lot of basic issues. But I mean, you can't really teach someone how to find their soul and how to express themselves. I mean, they have to figure that out for themselves.
Yeah.
So I mean, and there's no real way, unless you're on one-on-one. Maybe a private teacher could do that as a guru.
I think so.
You know, but you know, if you're in class, if you're in an improvisation class, that's not really what that's about at that point. You know, although maybe some schools, maybe there are more progressive, you know, schools. I don't know. I mean, there are other schools with different philosophies, but again, I just think it's always up to the individual. I mean, it's always up to you what you're going to do with whatever you take away from here.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Jay, what else?
Speaking of college and what advice would you give to someone who's about to graduate and go into this big scary world where at the present time our economy is the worst it's ever been in 80 years,
right?
And it seems like the deck is stacked against us. So what kinds of advice?
Yeah, well, I would say make it happen. If you really want to. If you really want to play jazz, it depends on what your goals are. I mean, I would say get specific about what you're looking to do. Don't just have like kind of a pie in the sky, like, oh, I want to be a jazz star, or because that's just kind of a silly thing to say, But maybe I would say, look inside yourself and think, what would I be happy doing as a musician? What do I really want to do? What's my like really specific goal? Is my specific goal to start my own band and to start booking myself gigs around New York City? Maybe that's one specific goal that you might have, and that's an achievable goal. That's something that you can work on. Now, the survival aspect of it is something else again. I mean, I can only tell you what my experience was, because that's the only thing, that my only frame of reference, because everyone has different experiences. For me, I was always one of those people that would rather have the horn in his mouth than sitting behind a desk. I was always that way. That's not to say that that's necessarily the right way for everyone. I know a lot of people that took day gigs and didn't want to compromise their musical life in any way, and only wanted to play the gigs that they really wanted to play, and made their money in some other way. So it's kind of by hook or by crook, however you get to survive, through this is how you get to survive through it. You find your way. I mean, it's like, we all do it by the seat of our pants, How do you make rent? I don't know. I put it together by doing this, and by doing recordings and going on tour. But back in the day, man, when I first got out of school in New York City and I had to start paying rent, I was like, oh my, I was feeling like you. I was like, holy shit, what am I gonna do? And what happened was, I met a drummer that I knew from 4 years before, who said, hey man, what are you doing Saturday night? I've got a blues band. You want to play in my blues band? And that was the start of 8 years of going out to
the Finns, wasn't it?
Yeah, you played with the Finns. Yeah, so you know those guys. Yeah. And so I ended up playing in this blues band, making $70 a night, 2 nights a week, sleeping on the drummer's couch in New Brunswick. It wasn't exactly a glamorous existence for a little while, but between that and getting the occasional wedding, and then playing like my one jazz gig a week at Augie's, I made it happen. I started the ball rolling. And it was just sort of, and then they kept teaching the occasional lesson. I mean, it really is it's like a snowball effect. I mean, I'm sorry, there's a lot of stuff that goes into this. Try and be organized and on time. Try and look decent. Like here I am with stained shirt saying look decent, but try and be presentable. When you go and do things. Try and go with a good attitude. Be a good guy, so that the people around you can work with you. I can't tell you how many brilliant musicians that I know that have lost tons of gigs because people can't be around them. They can't deal with them. Mm-hmm. And then they wonder, why can't I get a gig, man? Why can't I get? It's like, well, no one wants to be around you right now because you're a drag. So all of those things are really important. I think that's the advice that I would have, is just work on who you are as a person. Be healthy, get enough sleep, all of those things that as a person that we have to work on first, and then have some consistency musically too, see if you can get yourself into a routine, where you're working on at least a little something every day, so.
Promote, what are you working on now? What would you hope for people to? Or like how many records you have? What, 5 or 6?
5 or yeah. I can't remember now. 5 or 6.
Cool.
So
what's the latest one?
The latest one is this Aretha Franklin tribute
Oh,
record.
is it out?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's called Project A with it's more rock and roll guys actually, kind of, or R&B guys. Actually, Jerry Jamot plays on it, who played on in her band originally. That was fun. An interesting, completely different project, you know. But right now, I'm just kind of more concerned. I mean, actually, I've been taking mostly just sideman gigs. I haven't really been doing so much leader stuff because I've been in the mode of going back into the woodshed. You know, I've been in the mode of kind of like going back and becoming my own student again. You know, that's what I'm interested in doing right now is starting to have a period of time where I'm really, like Sonny did, you know, in a way, like having a period of time of real, serious, individual study and practice. That's what I'm interested in right now. I'm not interested in doing too much recording right now. I want to really delve into myself as a composer and as an improviser, and really, you know, start exploring that aspect more. You know what I mean? Before I make another record, you know.
Cool.
So that's where I'm at. Yeah.
Good.
Just doing a lot of touring and teaching. So.
We'll probably have to wrap it up. Joel, if there's anything else you want to like promote or anything down the line, I mean, we're gonna transcribe this, edit it down. We'll all take a look at it. And, you know what I mean? But be shameless.
I'm trying to think if there's anything. Well, there's
like places to see you play.
Yeah, there's a cool concert. I'm trying to remember. I think it's in June.
Okay.
Is it June? I'm playing with the Hartford Symphony, doing the Stan Getz Eddie Sauter piece Focus with the Hartford Symphony. I believe it's in June, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, people can look it up online and they'll find it. That's one of the big things. I mean, I'm trying to think if there's anything else really.
Your website?
Oh, website is www.joelfrahm.com, and people can see what I'm up to there. So that's great.
Good resource.
Yeah.
Did I miss where you went to school? And
Manhattan School of Music. I actually spent 1 year at Rutgers University and then transferred in my sophomore year to move to New York and finished up at Manhattan. Just did my undergrad.
Did you
I didn't
study
do
with
my
Ralph
graduate.
there?
I wish they didn't allow me to. I would have loved to have studied with Ralph.
Talk about Ralph Bowen. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I would have
Actually
loved to have studied with him.
A freak in a lot of ways. Freak tenor.
Oh, he's unbelievable.
Yeah.
He's an incredibly thorough person.
Oh my God.
You know.
Why did you leave Rutgers? You just wanted to go to New York?
Well, no, it's not that I wanted to go to New York. I just I felt like the playing opportunities there were minimal, you know, and I felt like I just wasn't getting my butt kicked, you know. I mean, and then as soon as and my teacher who was John Purcell, who was kind of a saxophone guru, you know, about technique on the saxophone, said, "Hey man, you know, maybe you want to check out, you know, New York City and see maybe transfer to Manhattan School of Music. I think you'd be happier there." That's what he said. And so I went for an audition after my first year, and I went to my audition, and the rhythm section was Gary Dial, Sean Smith, and Willard Dyson. You know, it was a fantastic, you know, this great rhythm section, and it was like, and as soon as I counted off the tune, I was like, oh my God, you know, this is what it really is. You know, this is the place, because it was just, I could feel it immediately. And so then it was all over. I knew I had to go. You know, I knew I had to come to New York because I needed that feeling. I was addicted to that level of you know, playing jazz. You know, I mean, being around guys that could do it like that. So you know, that was really, it was important for me to go. You know, so, and then I just finished up my undergrad. I had enough of school by the time I finished my undergrad. You know, I mean, I actually applied to graduate school back at Rutgers again, because I really wanted to study with Ralph. Actually, that was the reason I did it. And I got in, but they wanted me to like conduct the pep band and stuff like that as a TA, and I said, you know, don't think I can do that.
Yeah.
Like conduct at basketball games and stuff. I was like, nah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
You know, so that was that. No more school.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joel.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure.